Well, good morning, everyone. And once again, welcome to another live this morning. Hope you're having a great start to your day. And we want to do part 2 of Stress Awareness Month. There's Brahim, number 1 on the hit parade, and Mike, number 2. And nice to have you guys on with us this morning. And Andrea from Niagara Falls, and Eric, bonjour, from Ottawa. Madeleine, good morning. Kippawa, Quebec. Kathy from the Philippines. Lori Lee, Ventura, California. And Nina. Marianne. Wendy, good morning. And Nellie. And Cecilia, Rainy, Sudbury, you're right. Sandy, Chilliwack, British Columbia. Georgie, Halifax, Nova Scotia. Jeanette, bonjour. And Nick from our staff. And Yolande, how are you? Fran from Orangeville. And Donna from Park Hill. Mary from Norwich. And Jeanette. And Jeanette from our staff. Marlene, good morning. Porto Basque. Sherry, Mississauga. Gloria, New York. Yvonne Petawawa, good morning. Marcia, hola, from Mexico. Deb from Timmins. Louise, Sudbury. Jerry, Hatley, Quebec. Leela, Verder. Marla, Ottawa. And Catherine, Fran. And Bruno, good morning to you. Shelley from Baxter. Another Donna, good morning. Rita. And Norma, Texas. Kim, Florida. Catherine, Parksville, British Columbia. Herma. And Bev. And Jocelyn from, did I just say that? Baxter. Cheryl, West Virginia. And Victoria, Saskatoon. Elaine, good morning to you. Lou Ella, West Tennessee. Rhoda, beautiful Labrador. Diane, Pat, couple more guys and we'll get going. Oh, Linda, and we love those Lindas. Milika, Stouffville. Wendy from London. Another Linda. And Meta. And Lorraine. North Carolina. Janet. Manitoulin Island. Good morning. Jocelyn. And Jean. Guys, we appreciate you guys coming on. Francis Marie. Now look at a little bit of a review and let's get going this morning. Hi, Carol from Mount Pearl, Newfoundland. And Linda, another Linda. Linda's all over the place. And Wanda from Virginia. Okay. And I hate to miss any of you guys. You know that. But sometimes they just scroll past me and I don't get a chance. Now, yesterday, what did we do? We talked about, well, first of all, it is, I didn't know this until I read it, that April is Stress Awareness Month. Okay. We ought to be aware of stress. And you know what? I certainly don't disagree with that. Stress today is a big, look, our body is equipped for stress. Okay? You got 2 little glands on top of your kidneys. They're called adrenal glands. Adrenal, on top of, okay? So you have adrenal glands, and they secrete a few things, but what they mostly secrete is a hormone called cortisol. Okay? They secrete adrenaline, cortisol. And you need that. Cortisol is normal If your adrenals are secreting cortisol, no problem. The problem is when they're secreting an enormous amount of cortisol over a long period of time, and that ain't any good for you. Okay? Now, if you remember, and I mentioned this yesterday, but I wrote a book called Serial Killers, 2 Hormones That Want You Dead. And I'll tell you, I never, even when I wrote it, I remember, I never thought it would have the impact. It was almost like a prophecy, okay? And I'm not a prophet nor the son of one. But I started to see a real trend in my office. 2 things. One, insulin resistance. Now you got to remember, I think it was 2011 when I wrote that book, if I'm not mistaken. It was on the 100th anniversary of the Martin Clinic. Okay, the Martin Clinic was established in 1911 by my grandfather, David Martin. Okay. And on the anniversary, or for the year 2011, I wrote a book called Serial Killers, 2 Hormones That Want You Dead. And it was it turned out to be very prophetic in this sense. Okay, let me just talk about insulin first. And what I was talking about is insulin is a serial killer. And like cortisol, insulin is on your side until it's not. As long as insulin will save your life every day. You know why? Because it will not allow your blood sugar to rise. We all know that sugar in the blood is highly toxic. And in 2011, when I wrote that book, I said, what's happening is that people are using insulin like no tomorrow. It's not meant for that. And we're squirting our pancreas. Remember illustrations, you know me, the ballpoint pen, your pancreas, the size of a ballpoint pen, sits right underneath your stomach. And its job, primarily, is to secrete insulin. And when you eat, you secrete some insulin. Normal. And when food is converted to sugar, your insulin acts as a traffic cop. It will not allow sugar to stay in the bloodstream. It's highly toxic. It's not moderation. It's out. You know what I did yesterday? I went to Costco. Okay. And guess what? I laughed because the Costco parking lot was full. What's new? It's always full. What's the illustration? Well, insulin has to take sugar and park it. And if you don't have enough room in your muscles, it will aim it at your liver. That's not good. Well, it's not good if it's too much. And so when I wrote in the book, even in 2011, I wrote in that book that we're using insulin too much. I don't even think we called it insulin resistance. We called it high circulating insulin. And insulin, when it's circulating and you use too much of it, your cells resist it. And that's not good. And 93%. Listen, even in 2011, I predicted that about 80% of the population was having trouble with insulin in 2011. They were developing a condition of high circulating insulin. We now call it insulin resistance. And that was 2011. By 2015, 16, the world out there, and not me, the world was saying 88% of the population is having trouble with insulin. And today, it's 93% of the population in North America are having trouble with insulin resistance. Not good. Again, repeat. Insulin resistance can lead to high blood pressure, high triglycerides, low HDL, elevated blood sugar, elevated uric acid, belly fat. These are all signs, and 93% of the population. Can you imagine? We're not winning the war here. We're losing the war. Okay, so that's insulin. And then I wrote, in my practice, I was seeing enormous stress as being a huge factor. Now, stress has been around as long as we've been around. Because God gave you a response to a stress, and that is cortisol. Cortisol. Someone scares you. That's cortisol. Adrenaline is short, but cortisol lasts longer. And again, if it's well managed, no problemo. But today, it's a huge problem. And we got a month called Stress Awareness Month. And yesterday, what I did is I talked to you about hidden signs or hidden symptoms of prolonged stress. And the first low-hanging fruit of stress, sort of hidden, is sleep disturbances. You don't sleep, your cortisol goes up. If your cortisol goes up and it stays up, you don't sleep. And sleep is a huge, huge, huge issue. And we went into some detail about your self-cleaning oven in your brain. The amount of stress is going to be a huge factor. You know, you see, and I mentioned this, by the way, okay? I mentioned this back in 2011. I talked about Alzheimer's. And the world has sort of forgot that Alzheimer's in 2005 was called type 3 diabetes. It was diabetes of the brain. And then that got, swept under the carpet. It wasn't, what can I use? It wasn't kosher. New dietitians didn't like it. Doctors didn't like it. What do you mean, type 3 diabetes? Because medicine had focused in on plaque in the brain. And they were scrambling to find medication for amyloid plaque. And they didn't want to hear anything about type 3 diabetes. What do you mean food has anything to do with Alzheimer's? What are you talking about? But I wrote in that book that a huge factor in Alzheimer's was insulin, type 3 diabetes. I reminded people that research had been done. And then you add cortisol, 2 hormones that want you dead. The second one, cortisol. What does cortisol do? It pours gasoline on the fire. That's why cortisol is involved, guys. It's not the cause of cancer. Okay? I always told people this. No, cortisol is not the cause of cancer. But it aggravates. Think about it. It pours gasoline on the fire of inflammation. If you have high circulating insulin resistance, and you have leaky gut, and you have yeast or fungus coming into your bloodstream, and you live on sugar, so you're feeding cancer cells, and they're renegades, and they take off, and they multiply, and you feed them. You're feeding them sugar. Now, on top of that, you're pouring gasoline on that. You're pouring an accelerator, because stress accelerates. And this is why, like, I mentioned it in probably the last 20 books that I wrote. Stress is a huge factor in cancer. It's not the cause of a cancer. It's not the cause of a cancer, but it accelerates the growth of tumors. And I talked about breast cancer. And my experience with history taking of breast cancer, any woman that has suffered from breast cancer, there's always sort of a huge dynamic in they went through a very traumatic episode in their lives. Divorce, separation, family dynamics, child sick, caregiving, daddy or mom, drains you, financial. There was always something you could actually point to in their history and say, yeah, that really didn't help. So it wasn't the cause, but it aggravated, it accelerated, like pouring gasoline on a fire in cancer. Stress Awareness Month. We need to be aware of it. And let me give you a few other hidden symptoms, okay? And hidden meaning that you wouldn't think necessarily it's stress. Look, digestive issues. Again, not necessarily caused. Cortisol doesn't necessarily, it could, but it doesn't necessarily cause the digestive issue. It makes it 10 times worse. Like, think, guys, for a minute. Just think of this for a minute. You know what, when you get butterflies? Okay? We've all experienced that, right? You get butterflies, like you're nervous and, and that's all right. I mean, Let's say you got to do some public speaking. You get nervous. Somebody asked me, do you get nervous, Doc? I said, nah, I'm a big mouth. I get nervous on other things, but not public speaking. But most people, public speaking, like you got to get up in front of the public and talk. Yikes! So you get butterflies. What's that? Okay. Well, that's your, your parasympathetic nervous system, cortisol, and you get butterflies. Now, what if those sort of butterflies don't go away? They become dragonflies. You know what I mean? It can really create and even pour gasoline on inflammation in your gut. And how many people they've got now IBD, irritable bowel disease, or they got ulcerative colitis, or they have gastritis. And my gut is really bad. And stress is a huge factor in that. A huge factor. So, think about that. That's why in my practice, I was like a dog on a bone to get that cortisol down. A dog on a bone. Because I knew that unless you're not going to eliminate stress, but unless you can lower the response to it, a person can be in big doo-doo, big problems, including cancer acceleration, digestive issues. They don't sleep properly. They never get into the recuperative sleep. And in the long run, that is a big factor in losing the memory center. Hormones. Inflammation in the brain, in the hypothalamus. It can affect the thyroid and the conversion of T4 to T3. And anxiety, just feeling anxious all the time. Let me just get a few more I wrote down here. I'm slow. Talked about memory, lack of motivation. I wrote this down because, again, this is more of an accelerator. Skin. Now, skin, okay, like skin conditions, eczema, psoriasis, dermatitis or whatever. I always used to tell my patients, I'm going to lower your cortisol. Well, doc, what's that got to do with my skin? Well, first of all, you got leaky gut. 100%. What you see on the outside happened on the inside first. We're working inside out. Okay? So I always started. Yesterday, somebody put a real good thing. I really like to answer that because I really love our private Facebook group because somebody said, Doc, another doc, okay, said that sauerkraut is better than a probiotic. And I said, well, no, it's not. Now, sauerkraut has some probiotics. And when you make your own sauerkraut, I got no problem with it. I like fermented foods. I really do. Eat pickles, okay? I like fermented foods. Even yogurt, plain Greek yogurt. Like, yeah, it's got some probiotics in it. The problem is the second that you buy it in Canada or the United States off the shelf or in the grocery store, you got to understand it's got to be pasteurized. That means the heat has been put up to 1200 degrees and there ain't a bacteria that can survive in that. We thank Louis Pasteur for that. I'm sure his intentions were good. Okay? It's like an antibiotic when you pasteurize. You're getting rid of all the bacteria, except you get rid of the good guys too. And again, I'm not telling you that sauerkraut's no good. But when someone tells you that sauerkraut is better than a broad spectrum probiotic, you'd have to eat sauerkraut till it's coming out your ears. And when I'm talking about skin, you got leaky gut, any skin condition, you have a leaky gut. You better fix that. And sauerkraut, yeah, it's good for you. It is. But it's not therapeutic like a 50 billion, you can Google this, I think, and see if there's anyone like me on Facebook or whatever. I talk about probiotic. You need 16,000 yogurts. And even then, you need 16,000 4-ounce yogurts to get one capsule of 50 billion bacteria, friendly bacteria. Are you going to eat 16,000 yogurts? And it's not just numbers, guys. Okay, sauerkraut's good. Again, I like it. But you don't get a broad spectrum probiotic. Like, for example, when you have fungus or yeast, you need L. reuteri, you need L. rhamnosus. Like if you got acidophilus in yogurt, I got no problem. I like acidophilus. I do. But if you don't have certain strains that do certain things, you ain't fixing yeast or candida or fungus in your body. You can't. Okay? Why did I even answer that question? Oh yeah, we're talking about leaky gut. Leaky gut isn't caused by cortisol, but it's aggravated by that stress, big time. Leaky gut is caused primarily, the number one cause is antibiotics that are everywhere, by the way. And antibiotics, wonderful things to save your life, but they destroy they do not care what bacteria they destroy. They destroy everything in its sight. Good, bad. It's what I used to call friendly fire. You know that in a war? A lot of people, a lot of soldiers get killed by friendly fire. They get killed by their own army. They didn't mean to. It's like, a war, things like that happen. And I'll tell you, people take an antibiotic and they don't even think about it because nobody's ever told them that, you know what happens when you take an antibiotic? And I never tell a person not to take an antibiotic. I never would do that. I said, you better remember though, antibiotics are the number one cause of leaky gut. and it's silent. You don't even know you have it. But if you don't have enough friendly bacteria, that little lining in your gut gets compromised. And now you're going to get some stuff in your bloodstream like yeast getting into the bloodstream. And remember, yeast is a carrier that loves to carry toxins with it. Yeast is like mold, guys. It's toxic on its own, okay? You have a little bit in your gut. It's well controlled. It's not in your bloodstream. Don't worry about it. But if it gets in the bloodstream, it becomes a carrier, like an ocean carrier. And it loves to hitch its wagon to heavy metals like mercury, lead, cadmium. Guys, 25, 30 years ago, I was talking about that. You can't get yeast in your blood, Dr. Martin. You want to bet? And it's a carrier. It'll get into your brain. And it's one of the reasons we see so much Parkinson's and ALS today. And that can be a factor too in a chronic degenerative condition like Alzheimer's in the brain. Yeast. Don't feed the bears. Okay. You having fun? Okay. Guys, we appreciate you. And we thank you for coming on. We love you dearly. Friday's question and answer. And if you have any questions, don't be shy, guys. Listen, we like the feedback in our private Facebook group. We do. We appreciate it. Okay? That's a community. Okay? In there. We appreciate you guys. Now be nice. Always be nice. Okay? Okay. Any questions at all, though, make sure you get them in for Friday's podcast. Okay? We love you guys. We'll talk to you soon.